If screen time turns your sweet kid into a ticking time bomb, this is why. Fast paced apps and videos aren't harmless. They overstimulate your child's brain, overwhelm their nervous system, and make transitions almost impossible. Let's break down what's going on underneath the surface and how to prevent meltdowns before they start. You know, I love my devices. I certainly rely on them, but there's a truth about screen time, too much screen time, and what it does to the brain. And, when you're wondering why your sweet little kid really turns into a nightmare on their devices when they've been on them too long, here's why. So, devices overstimulate the dopamine system, which wires the brain to create more stimulation. And, there's sort of like nothing like, particularly a touch device, that really gets that dopamine going. And then the prefrontal cortex gets underused because of the reliance on these devices. And that makes it harder for kids to self regulate and, when they're really primarily playing through devices, they're actually missing out on brain development. I know I've mentioned this before. If you listen to my episodes, 40% of 2.5-year-olds have their own device in America. That's pretty alarming, actually. And so we're giving these kids these devices way too early, and they're not replicating the play that you're supposed to have, right? Building and running and outside, right? Screens suppress melatonin, which disturbs sleep and mood. I'm filming all day today. These lights are going to mess with my sleep. Definitely going to take some melatonin tonight. The vagus nerve and the stress response system gets thrown off with too much of this volatile situation going on between the prefrontal cortex and the dopamine and the melatonin suppression. And that leads to more reactivity and emotional exhaustion. Kids just not are emotionally available when they are on devices for a long time. So you see a lot more volatility. You get screen hangovers where it's like they're almost flat after, like just sort of like not there, and poor frustration tolerance. So, what are signs of device dysregulation? So, the first one, it's going to be reactivity and meltdowns or aggression after screen time, right? So sometimes it's, not even the battle over the screen time ending. It just could be what happens after obsessive focus on devices, and fights over stopping. You've got a problem. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen once in a while, but if it is the go-to, your kid, their brain is really being negatively affected by too much screen time. Emotionally shut down, moody, after long screen usage. I would say that's a pretty typical behavior. So you've got to shorten it. Increased irritability, anger, anxiety, compulsive behaviors, refusal to engage in quote unquote boring tasks like homework, chores, or non screen activities. And these are all ages. Like teenagers should be able to do things outside of their screen. This isn't about spoiling your child with too much screen time. It's about protecting the brain that isn't wired to handle constant stimulation. Brains are supposed to have downtime. And so if we don't have downtime and getting the brain and the body to regulate, it doesn't know how to regulate. And so we get into this cycle, right? So what do we say, limit setting or explaining, right? I like to say, your brain needs a break in order to feel happy and be strong, right? And I was just sharing in a previous episode about this morning, Giancarlo got onto his computer without permission. He usually asks, but literally it's like the second day that school ended. And so like he's a little testing his limits, right? He's 14 years old. And so I was like, honey, your brain needs a break from this. And he was okay about it. He wasn't like, yes, mommy, you're the best, but he wasn't nasty. And it was just a much better thing, right? And when kids dysregulate, you can say things like, "You're not in trouble. Your brain is telling us it needs help shifting gears." Asking your kid to set limits is always a great idea. So, how do we set boundaries before screen time becomes a fight? I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to set boundaries before your kid gets on a device. And they need to be consistent people, right? So you need to create rules when everyone is calm. You're not going to be like, get your butt off of there right now. And your kids, having a meltdown. This is not a time to be like, let's talk about tomorrow, right? What are those rules and can you be consistent? I love to involve everybody in the planning. You want to say how much time feels fair to you because they might say 7 hours because that is what kids are spending. No, no exaggeration. But this is where you get a sense like what are they thinking? And then what are you willing to do? Like 30 minutes is not for a 10-year-old, they're barely going to get into a game, right? Using visual timers, charts, being clear, giving them a reminder, you have 5 more minutes, and then we're going to do some transition exercises. You always want to schedule buffer time in between video game and anything else you're doing because their brain is going to be wired and tired and you need to have some movement, some food, some connection because they're potentially going to be crabby. It's a really tough thing balancing out these screens. You want to have screen free time where everybody in the family, like meal times, um, also zones like your bedroom out. Right, got to stick to it. Right, people should not be sleeping with their phones next to them. The research says in your sleep will be disrupted because it will be wondering, it will be in your subconscious, will be thinking, is that going off? And again, be consistent. The boundary only works with repeated without emotion or debate. You have to be clear. The more consistent you are, I promise you, they will be so much better. So instead of just taking screens away, right, you want to think about what else are you doing? What else is going on in your child's life that is going to give real dopamine hits, right? So outdoor play, art, music, play dates, get together, hangouts with friends. And so important for your kids to be doing other things other than screens. The brain and the body need it. And without that, they're going to over rely on their devices. Always offer choices, right? Like after your device, you want to go outside? Do you want to practice your hoops? Do you want to draw? Whatever. Typically, don't do more than two. Um, Always use those pre-planned transitions, 5 more minutes, and then you decided you want to do shoot some hoops. So we're then going to go out and shoot some hoops, or you and your sister or whatever have a snack. Have it in advance. Oh, okay. Before you get on, what do you want to do in between that or before you start your homework? Don't ever give your device before homework. And we don't do devices during the week. I think it's a lot easier. Create a recovery routine. If your kid has dysregulated from a device, like what are your go-tos? Is it a splash of water? Is it taking a walk? Is it a big hug? Like think about that they're dysregulated from it. You always want to reinforce your child if they are dysregulated and they pull themselves back. You want to say like, "Oh, I know that was hard from you. I really appreciate that you went for a walk." And afterwards be like, "What do you think? Like, I feel like that's too much time. Your body is showing me it's too much time. How can we break it up better? Or let's talk about, doing more breaks in between, those kinds of things." Track your screen usage with your child and talk about how they feel afterwards without shame because they're not even realizing they're dysregulated, right? And, we want to ban our devices, but really what we're talking about is creating a calm and supportive environment where your child's brain and body can recover from digital overload because the reality is, that even books today are read on devices in schools. Like we're going to a high school that they were advertising they still have books. And I was like, what do you mean schools don't have books? Because it's a cost factor and it's convenience and it's all of these things. And so kids today are not always holding books in their hands, they're reading them, and then they want crave more and more devices. And again, we can't throw it out the window. We have to balance, right? I think that's important. So, if you're concerned that your child is really dysregulating because of the device, or maybe they're neurodivergent or have a clinical issue, and this is like kryptonite for them, and you're looking for more support, go to drroseann.com/help. Take our solution matcher, and it will help match you the right solution. All of our solutions guide you to nervous system regulation. And if you're looking for one-to-one support, you can go there, drroseann.com/help to get it. This is really tough stuff navigating device dysregulation. And I just want you to know that we struggle to manage it as well. We confidently put these things into place, but nothing is perfect. And the consistency has been key. So stay strong, keep balance, and make sure your kids have exciting, fun things to do, self regulation things to do, calming things to do that are not on devices.
Want more insights and solutions? Well, subscribe to our Dysregulation Insider and it will show up in your inbox every week.